thanks TT for putting this conference on. This is one of, as everybody said when they get up here, this is one of the best ones in the world. It's so much fun. It's great to see a bunch of familiar faces and new faces. I'd love to get to meet all of you, but probably won't be able to meet all of you. It's nice to see that our pioneers are up here in their stagecoaches, sitting in their rocking chairs. Are we? I've put my teeth back in for this. And yeah, I guess we're going into the Wayback Machine for this roundtable.
Taking all my intro jokes.
And I got advance permission to not have to pronounce Mostapha's last name. So I'm just going to get started. We have this roundtable where it's going to be mostly led by you. Hopefully you have some great questions for these people. But this is the pioneers of what is it? Grasshopper plugin. Grasshopper plugin pioneers. They don't probably need any introduction at all, but we're going to start with a few slides from each of them. And we're going to start with Mostapha from Ladybug Tools to, yeah.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Mostapha, and you probably know me because of Ladybug Tools. A little bit about my background. So I started as an architect, moved into environmental design, environmental analysis, and architecture when I was doing my master's. Then worked a little bit, came to the US, went to UPenn to get another master in environmental building design, which was between software development, environmental design, and architectural design. And then 2013 released Ladybug, and shortly after that I joined TT Core Studio, came to New York. I was teaching at Penn and it was going well, but speaking of turns, we turned down here, started Ladybug Tools, LLC as a company with Chris, and said, okay, let's do software development and environmental design. Then things happened, and then after turn, I had kind of this thing, more of a bounce. And now I'm in a product management, sales, and marketing position more than anything else. And I really like it. Yeah, I do. This is my first Grasshopper script ever. I didn't know data trees existed. I'm proud of it. So Ladybug was released January 13. This is the announcement from 2013. And then it grew to Ladybug Tools, which is Ladybug, Honeybee, Dragonfly, Butterfly, Spider. And the three, Ladybug, Honeybee, and Dragonfly, are well-maintained right now. Dragonfly, well-maintained. Butterfly and Spider are kind of in hibernate. Interestingly enough, Butterfly is the one that has the most number of stars in GitHub. I don't know why, but some people love it. Our values are, one, everything should be open source. All the assumptions should be visible and editable. It should be scientifically validated, and it should be free and flexible. There should not be anything that stops you from running studies more accurately if you don't have money. And the main value of Ladybug Tools is connection between all these tools, really. That our development philosophy has been like, I never open sourced Ladybug or Ladybug Tools. It was always open source. It started as open source, it ended open source. And I love the fact that it's always hackable. I love that it's not compiled. You can just double click and edit it and you have your new thing. This educational path was always very important to me. Getting it started, and it was always a community-based thing. I mean, I think we were the first one who started our own discourse, because in the old thing, I couldn't find my own answers, which is pretty active. So it's a very active community. We have lots of downloads, 30,000 active forum members, 15 forums, and 5,000 research papers came out of it. And we have about 6,000 page views, if that means anything. So why did I start Ladybug? I actually went back to old presentation. I found this because I didn't want to make up stuff. So it was awareness. I wanted things to be easier and faster. I wanted them to be integrated. I want more people to be capable. And I want us to move from what and how to why we're doing these things and stuff, just like, how do I run a radiation analysis? The other reason was, I hate this way of people thinking about how you run building environmental studies, because the reality is like this. It's a mess of like the things that you do, go back and turns and all that. The other one was, can I swear? Yeah, it was beeping hard to run iterative simulation. Okay. And it was also beeping hard to do things like this, to communicate data on top of geometry and like say, this is how the outdoor comfort is at this hour and the sun is there. But why does Ladybug Tools still continue to exist and be maintained? Christopher Mackey. Chris, yeah, give him a round of applause. He's not here. Chris joined the open source project early on. He was a student at the time doing his master's at MIT, contributed a lot. And now he does most of the development for Ladybug Tools and still around. The other reason is the community. This is a code from the book Too Big to Know, which I really believe in. When an expert network is functioning at its best, the smartest person in the room is the room itself. And finally, because a commercial product that we started building called Pollination, that is built on top of Ladybug Tools. It started as a SBIR grant, 2018. Thank you, Department of Energy. And I think we got the grant because of popularity of Ladybug Tools. Because if you read the thing, we didn't know what we were doing. We just said the stuff. Yeah, like everything is built on top of each other. And because of that, Ladybug Tools gets better, Pollination gets better. We have to maintain it. It's like we had to come up with a business model that works. I don't believe in open source business model. We can disagree on that. And what Pollination is, if you haven't seen it, we basically solve this problem. This is a GBXML with Revit native export. It looks like a building after an explosion and a tornado, and it stayed there for 2 years. So now this is what you get with Pollination from the same model. We have a model editor, which kind of like does most of the magic, which is a web-based editor. And then the key is, if you get that model, the core Pollination model add, we guarantee the translation to all these different energy modeling software. If there is a mistake, we cannot solve it, we give your money back. I'm not kidding. The other one is we wanted everyone to be able to do everything also in Rhino, so you can build an energy model for everything, that one, and even this one. And you can do the same with Rhino. So this is Ladybug Tools and Pollination timeline. The project has been around for a long time, and we have done it one at a time. I took my time between Ladybug and Honeybee to make sure people know enough about weather data before running energy or daylight simulation and all that. Thank you. That's me.
You're already ready. Next up, we got Nate Miller from Proving Ground.
Is this on? Good? Good. Cool. This is going to be a little different. I have no slides. I have really no prepared remarks. I'm just going to be talking a little bit about Lunchbox and thinking about reflecting on how it came to be and where I'm at now and where I think we're going. I got the invite from David, so thank you for having me in. I think for my money, this is probably one of the best events, and when it comes to the intersection between technology and the architecture, engineering, construction industry. I was ambivalent about the topic and whether or not I wanted to participate because it had the word pioneer in it. And I thought, oh, it finally happened. I'm old. And Lunchbox is a teenager, 14 years old. I have a son that's 10, you know, so a lot of stuff has happened over the lifespan of Lunchbox. So I wanted to maybe start just by like, how did Lunchbox come to be? Where are my Lunchbox users? Yeah, there we are. I graduated from architecture school in 2007, and around that time, my wife and I decided, hey, we're going to move to Los Angeles. I didn't know anyone in Los Angeles. We were going to start our career as designers in architecture. And so when you move to a big city, I'm from Nebraska, you move to a big city, it's really hard to make friends. It's really hard to kind of figure out where you fit and how you kind of situate yourself within a community. And the first thing I did when I moved into my apartment, one of the first things I did from a digital standpoint is I started a blog, very creatively named Nathan Miller's Blog. And the purpose of the blog was to sort of track and think through what I was doing as a professional and why was I doing it. The earliest posts on the blog were about maybe little discoveries I was making in Los Angeles. I threw up some design competitions that I was kind of doing, tracked some experiments I was doing with Rhino at the time, a little bit of Revit here and there. And a big motivator for doing this was just to figure out if I could connect with people that had similar interest as me. And if I could start to like get involved and start to build a bit of a, find a community or help shape a community. Around the same time, a certain tool came out called Explicit History. I had been dabbling in parametric design with generative components. Any GC users here? Anyone really want to date themselves? Yes, generative components. And it really kind of, when Explicit History came on the scene, all of a sudden you had this parametric capability. It was sitting in Rhino. And I was like, oh, I'm going to kind of track and create a bit of a diary for myself. I want to experiment with this tool. I want to start to really think about how this can be used in my own work. I wanted to solve problems for myself. And I started creating custom components and like scripts that just were helping me kind of basically survive the world of design. I worked at a company called MBBJ. We did a lot of competitions. It was very stressful, very hard work just to get through some of these things. And I was like, if I could come up with tools that could help me get through this, I will have achieved a goal for myself. But then I thought, looking at the community around Grasshopper and looking at how people are helping shape the creation of this tool, there was a very humble beginnings to Grasshopper. It was like a Google group, and David Rutten was kind of posting betas of this thing, and everyone was contributing to it. And I thought, well, if these people can contribute, if Andy Payne and Daniel Piker and these folks that are making awesome plugins can contribute, maybe I can contribute too. And that's where Lunchbox really came into play. I took all of these scripts, all these things that were helping me create patterns and little workflows and stuff that was kind of trying to help make my life easier. I thought, well, what if I could help other people make their lives easier too with this by putting it out there and letting people download it for free, and also kind of in some ways hang my hat out there and say, hey, I'd like to be a part of this dialogue. And that's really what Lunchbox has been about. I've made other tools along the way. Proving Ground, the blog changed its name from Nathan Miller's Blog to Proving Ground. And then Proving Ground Blog became Proving Ground the company. Now I'm a business owner, and I'm, made it as part of the company's mission, this idea that we can help others use their technology. Lunchbox has been a part of that since the beginning. It continues to be maintained. And I'm excited to kind of talk with the panelists about what that means. What does it mean to like make things that can enable a community? What does it mean to help people and connect with people using this technology that we're making today? So I'm at time. I'll pass the mic.
Thanks, Nate. Our third panelist is Andrew Heumann, famous for a couple things: Human UI, Heumann, MetaHopper, more recently JSwan. And as Nate mentioned, has been doing Rhino plugin. Was one of the early Grasshopper plugin people. So, Andrew.
So, I mean, it's as simple as that. I basically just owe Grasshopper my career. I first started using it in undergrad. This was pretty much right after the sort of explicit history to Grasshopper switch. This was before data trees, before undo, when sliders looked like that for some reason. And my professor, Donna Kupkova, had introduced our second year studio to it, and I was just hooked. It felt like a way to model with superpowers, to think about design in a systematic way and explore a kind of a design possibility space in this non-linear way that just wasn't possible otherwise. By the time I graduated, I had kind of taught myself a little bit of C# and I was writing little scripts, mostly just by downloading stuff that was on the Grasshopper forum and modifying it myself. And I had started needing to refer to object attributes in the Rhino model quite a lot, and that's basically where my first plugin, Heumann, was born. I had gotten the hang of hooking into various Rhino object APIs, and so I just kept building out tools for talking to whatever Grasshopper didn't support, like lights and hatches and blocks and layers and things like that. And around the time right before I graduated, I was a reader of the aforementioned Nathan Miller blog, and happened to see a job posting, and was lucky enough to, I think actually this wasn't the job that I wound up getting, but through this application, that was how I wound up at NBBJ in Seattle, which was a great place. I got to work on super interesting projects, and there was this incredible critical mass of Grasshopper geeks on the team, like Nate Holland and Mark Seep, and later Nick Desbians, who we heard from earlier. There was this fruitful exchange of ideas, and we as a team were on this mission to spread the computational design gospel to the entire firm and get more people utilizing these powerful tools. But there was internal resistance. There was enthusiasm, but people were nervous. Despite in-house training, our colleagues were reluctant to pick up those tools, even though we had crafted them and tried to set them up in a clean way, because it just felt too technical and intimidating. And that's where Human UI came from. We figured out that you could spin up a more friendly looking interface window directly from a Grasshopper plugin. And not only that, but you could actually start to construct those interfaces using Grasshopper components. And so we built out more and more internal tools that utilized Grasshopper sort of as a programming language, and then exposed a friendlier UI over the top that our teammates were more willing to engage with. And I should say NBBJ deserves a ton of credit for their willingness to open source this tool. It was around the time that I decided to leave and move to Woods Bagot, and we kind of came to an agreement that they would let me take it open source so that I could continue to maintain and update it, and they could still enjoy the benefits of those updates. So at Woods Bagot, continued to use this, built some absolutely horrific and overcomplicated tools with it, and continued to maintain the plugin and build a few new things as well. And I apologize to the community because I have not been upholding my end of this bargain and have not been maintaining really any of these plugins for some time, but blame Ian. It's his fault. Working on Grasshopper plugins was really how I learned to be a software developer. It was how I learned to code. It was how I learned how to read technical documentation. And I basically, the way that I know how object-oriented programming works is because I was decompiling the Grasshopper source and seeing what David Rutten did under the hood. And in my experience, just having put a real tool out into the world forced me to learn a lot about sort of building intuitive and natural user interfaces, primarily, I should say, by failing at that. And also learning how to have conversations with users and process user feedback to make software better, which is a skill that I continue to work on to this day. And in general, I encourage everybody to build stuff, put it out in the world, even if it's imperfect, even if you're embarrassed about it, because if I hadn't done that, I'm confident I wouldn't have gotten the opportunities that I have gotten to speak to this audience and others, and to be seen as part of a global computational design community. And if I hadn't done that, I'm confident I wouldn't be working as a software developer for a startup like HYPAR today, which is a lot of fun. I would be sad if I didn't have that opportunity. And since I already gave my HYPAR spiel earlier, I don't have to rehash it here, but I did want to highlight something that might be unexpected, which is that even today, as a professional software developer, I still use Grasshopper on a daily basis. In particular, I take advantage of one of my lesser known plugins a lot, JSON, which is a tool for deconstructing and building JSON objects. And I use this to debug our app, to visualize and analyze geometry that comes out. You can just fire up the Chrome DevTools console, grab objects at runtime in JSON format, paste them into Grasshopper, and then I can poke around and see what's going on and why those vertices are overlapping or why that thing isn't working. So Q generic AI image slide. I know that the design tool landscape of the future will probably look very different, but I hope that as a community, we can continue to foster an ecosystem that is conducive to this sort of free hacking, building, and sharing of our tools, ideas, and knowledge. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. All right, and up next we have David Mans from TT Core, who is known in the Grasshopper community for Bumblebee and Mesh Plus, and he's going to tell us a little bit about getting started there.
First, I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here. Just the turnout's been fantastic this year, and I hope everyone's been enjoying the event so far. A little bit of my background. So the idea to start building tools for designers came about in a class I took in Pratt Institute with Sei-Wei Wang. Anyone who's doing a hackathon tomorrow, he'll be one of the judges. So fantastic person to speak to. But he had a course that was just about tool making. And this was back when like your two choices were processing and RhinoScript had just come out. But it fascinated me, like how do we build tools? So I started down this road, and 16 plugins later, I still am not a good coder, but I keep putting them out. So just a little idea about why I kind of got into this. One, I wanted to make existing projects accessible. So lots of different standards, things hidden in Rhino that weren't accessible in Grasshopper, connecting to other applications like Adobe Illustrator, and enabling things like connections to Excel is just something that interested me. Can we link these things up? And so learned a bunch of languages along the way doing that, which just kept opening doors to new opportunities and new ways to approach it. And then the big one was like learn something new. Like I knew nothing about G code, so I just wanted to write a plugin, and Grasshopper was the best way to visualize it. So why not build a plugin for it? And then again, code doesn't have to be good if no one sees it. So just put it out there for the world to try. But yeah, I didn't know a lot about topology. I was really interested in it. So I started building a plugin called Mesh Plus around that idea, and it turned into something that people use. And then the other one was to create something new. I just wanted to build tools that would allow people to make something new that maybe wasn't available within the Rhino ecosystem, or even something I'd seen out in the software interface or out in the software world. So the first one I started with was Bumblebee back in 2010. And this basically happened when I was working on a project at Woods Bagot, which was one of the first architectural projects I'd ever worked on professionally. And essentially weekly, we were putting together panel schedules and tracking efficiencies in that. And I got really tired of copying and pasting things. So I found TT Toolbox. And then I loved it, but I wanted to add colors because I got tired of doing that too. So I was like, okay, maybe I can learn something about this and delve into it. So I started playing with that API, and then I reached out to Ben House, and Ben actually gave me some advice on how to develop something. And I kind of realized, well, if other people are contributing and making this possible, maybe I should just put it out there in the world. And I wasn't as confident as some of the other high-end people here had made some really powerful plugins. So I was like, oh, I'll just put this out there and see what people did with it. And it sat there for a while. And then I got a random email one day from someone who wanted it to the 16th decimal point. And I was like, this has to be an undergraduate student who doesn't understand tolerances. Like, it's just getting way too obsessive. So I looked them up, and I found out it was someone working on the Oracle racing boats. And I was like, okay, they really do need it. So maybe I should look into this. And it just sparked this moment where it was like, oh, people are using this, and they're using it to solve problems. So I should probably take it more seriously, develop it further, flush out all of the different kind of tools. So I kind of took that thinking into Mesh Plus, the next plugin I developed. And I'll just fire through these real quick. But basically, I put this one up. Basically, I had a kid. I needed something to do while I was up all night holding him. So I decided to learn about topology, built this thing, put it out there. And then one day I saw a photo of this lamp by Wayland Schmidt, who just built this using one of the tools. And I was like, wow, like people can actually make really incredible stuff that I didn't even think about with these tools out there. So it sparked an interest in me and kind of a pivot in my career path, where at Grimshaw I was using this for projects, but it began to shift away and just kind of get into the idea of now I'm just going to try to build tools where I have no idea what people are going to do with them, but I saw one interesting thing and put it out there. So I also got tired of naming them after animals and trying to be clever. So I just started calling everything Plus. It's about the time Disney Plus came out. So I was just like, I'm just going to do that. So Bitmap Plus was a plugin I developed that basically just lets you do bitmap manipulation inside of Grasshopper. I was just using it for texture map generation for frit patterns at the time, but I've seen some incredible stuff from companies I can't talk about that have done stuff with it. So it's still out there. Graphic Plus was something I made as a professor at Pratt Institute because I got tired of explaining how colors and exporting worked in Grasshopper. So I just wanted to generate SVGs on the fly. So put that out there. UI Plus was just something where we were using Human UI, and I just needed a clock component. So instead of adding it in, I wrote my own. And then just built this thing that kind of integrated the Rhino Windows interface. And this is my least supported plugin because it's the biggest headache. But one of the great things about open sourcing is 15 years later, people do take what you make and actually change it. So I'm happy to say people have been contributing to this one and kind of keeping it up. Let's see if it'll skip. One that went absolutely nowhere, but was fun to work with was 3+, which is basically just building 3JS models directly out of Grasshopper that you could load up on AWS on S3 buckets and just pan around and see the model. Just wanted to learn 3JS. And then Excel Plus was one actually, we started working with Shapediver a lot more, and I became interested in the idea of how do you make these things headless? How can you make sure all these tools work for people that aren't actually running this on their desktop? So this was a way to basically generate Excel files without needing COM object connections or active instance of Excel. There's probably a few more. Oh, PDF Plus was one we mean to make PDFs out of Shapediver. So let's just make a little PDF thing. And I found a great plugin there that lets you just basically build Word document style. So it's like, oh, this is super easy. So we use it all the time now. And then the last few I'll just go through are other ones where it's like, okay, Mesh Plus was fun with meshes. People liked it. Can I open up tools like that for curves and surfaces and see what people do with that? So again, any ideas here, let me know because I ran out. And then I swore I was going to stop making plugins, but again, Shapediver, I wanted to generate plots and graphs. So this one's still a work in progress, but you're basically going to be able to generate all types of different standardized plots, run them in the viewport, in the viewer, on desktop, inside the canvas, etc. And it's just another opportunity to learn more about Grasshopper than I did. And the last one, which I keep promising every year, but will come out someday, is Mesh Plus 3, which, yeah, it's not even half done. But this one was just an opportunity to like, let's do every possible combination and just learn about topology. So this plugin, again, don't know when it's coming out, but it's just going to have a whole bunch of new kind of tools and toys to play with someday. So yeah, that's it.
Feels kind of weird for me to be up here. Maybe I'll come sit there next to you guys. All right, so it sort of seems like a foregone conclusion that you're all developers and that you've all released stuff out into the world. But as Rhino product manager, I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of programmers, and especially with new programmers, but not necessarily only with new programmers. People are really pretty afraid to put their stuff out in the world, like even to just show it to somebody else on the same screen. And so I know that that's a big hurdle for people. And I'm curious from each of you, how did you get over that?
I think for me, and I think for a lot of folks that are doing this kind of work, I started in design. I started in architecture, and the kind of upbringing as a designer, I think automatically puts you in very kind of vulnerable positions. You have to present your work at design reviews. You have to come up with ideas that are new and novel and then talk to people about it. You're kind of trained to do that the entire way through school and then the entire way through your profession. And I think that, for me, greatly influenced why I wanted to put tools out into the world. Knowing that, hey, I have an idea, I want to see if this idea resonates with someone else. And if this tool will resonate with other people, if it helps someone else solve a problem, that was my primary motivator. I have no formal like developer training whatsoever. I still, even probably to this day, think of myself more as a designer than I do a software developer, even though primarily what we do is make software at Proving Ground. And so I think that more than anything, this idea of being a designer and being someone that is communicating ideas is the thing that kind of motivated that kind of attitude more than anything.
I did it because Nate was doing it. But I mean, in truth, like I think it was part of the community vibe. Like it was the Grasshopper forums were just full of people being like, I made this crazy thing, check it out. And I love that. I feel like that was really special. And it was just like, well, of course, if I'm gonna make a cool thing, I'm gonna show it off. I'm gonna get, validation from all these other geeks. And I think like it almost like wasn't even a question really. It was like, yeah, I made a cool thing. I want to show it off to all these people. So I hope that spirit still exists to some degree.
Along similar veins, I mean, for me, it was actually a lack of confidence in the code that I just opened up all the components. So like if I did something wrong, somebody would fix it and maybe repost it. And it happened a couple times, which was good. And then I actually pulled back from that when at Acadia one year, Brian Ringley called me grandpa for writing in VBA. So I took some time to learn C#, and then I started coding GHAs in C#. And it took a while until I got confident enough to put up code that wasn't horrendously embarrassing. But it became a good benchmark of like, I actually need to do this better. Like I need to be more consistent. I need to clean up what I'm doing because no formal training in scripting whatsoever. Just learned it from Stack Overflow at the time and the Grasshopper forum. But yeah, that was really it. And then once it's out there in the world and people started contributing, I was like, well, I'll just put it out there. People know more than me. Alex has done many pull requests on my work from Shapediver and cleaned up a lot, and I've learned a lot that way.
I mean, to get over the fear, honestly, ignorance. I had no fear. I didn't know what I'm doing at the time. I just, something I'm sharing, like it was very kind of like, this is something I've done, it works for me, it will work for other people. But I should say that the first time that I released the plugin, I did it from a Starbucks in Chicago Old Town, which is the place I used to go develop stuff. And I uploaded the thing and I said, it's out there. Took me like a minute and it hit me. I'm like, what did I do with my life? I went and threw up in that bathroom from the stress. It took like a week or so. I'm like, oh, no one said anything, crashed or anything. So after that, it was fine.
All right, thanks. I actually want to just open this up to the crowd, see if anybody's got some questions for these people.
Since I'm holding the microphone, I might as well start. So this is a question for everybody, even though it kind of originates with Mostapha. So many moons ago, I watched you at an AECtech panel at Baruch College, which is actually where I think that picture was taken. But you were making a distinction between software that's open source and it has kind of like a vibrant open source community around it with multiple people contributing and kind of guiding where this project goes, and tools that for one reason or another started as closed source and then were open sourced at some point. So my question is, do you think that there is an opportunity for a closed source tool that was open sourced to grow a healthy community around it? And what do you think is kind of the crucial component of having that vibrant community? I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah. Where's Rob? So I don't know. So for the second one, there are projects that larger companies have open sourced and they have been successful, in tech. I don't have much experience there, but I can tell you, like, for an open source project to be community driven and be successful, there's a huge maintenance work there. You will write more answer to people questions and more documentation than you will write code. And you have to get very comfortable with that being your main job at some point and find someone else to write the code. If you're successful and you're helping, like me answering Chris's questions when he started, and then Chris took over, I could answer more questions. I think that's very important. The other thing, again, I don't know about the closed source project, but for our project was very important. I think we set the tone early on. Clearly, we just set the expectation not to be too high. And I think that really helped. And I think the other thing was set the thing that everyone knows everyone can be wrong. And I think, like, I see that in tech open source project, a lot of people, there's a lot of like who is right, who is wrong. And like, we never had that. And I think that really helped to have a healthy community. And the last one for me is sometimes you have to, for your open source project to be successful, you have to basically take responsibility, be part of the team of the people who use your software. You have basically worked like you're hired by those people to get the things done. because the key is to make your early adopters to look like superhuman in their offices. The last thing you want to do is for them to take the risk and look like idiots because they wasted everyone's time. And look at this, this doesn't work. I think if you can do that, most people don't care if it's closed source or open source. It's mostly a community. I mean, Grasshopper is not open source. Very successful.
Portions of Lunchbox are open source, but I think the reason why people download it is probably because more of the closed source stuff that it can do. And the open source, closed source thing has never been kind of a motivator for me in the work that we do. It's more been about, does this help someone solve a problem in a way that is helpful? And that's why people go to your tool. That's why people latch on and really want to learn more about it and get excited about the next release because it helped them in some way. We've put out open source tools that were open source from the beginning before, and it's really had, I would say, no impact really on the stuff. In fact, very rarely did we ever ask or get inquiries from like, oh, I want to do a commit for this thing. It almost kind of just felt like, we made it open source because it feels nice to make things open source. That's not to say that you can't create very valuable communities around open source. It's obviously been very proven, but at least for us, the motivator, the distinction between closed and open has really not been as relevant as just the problem solving component to it.
One more thing. So let me put my product management hat on. So one thing I think which can fail is if you open source a project and you think the same people who developed the project will be continuing to support the open source project. Because to get a good project working, you need different type of personalities. People get excited by code. People get excited by performance. For an open source project, you have to have people who get excited by helping people. You have to have people who get excited to get other people to look like superhuman. That's the key. I think like you need to hire, if you don't, you have to look and to be honest about your team. If you don't have those kind of people, you have to hire someone or get someone to do that. That's the main difference, another main difference.
Okay, other questions?
Yeah, thanks. Great presentations, awesome plugins. I wonder, sometimes we find tempting when we start coding, like keep polishing and polishing and polishing. When do you guys know when it's ready? Or maybe you don't know when it's ready, but when do you guys know it's time to push the button and commit that thing to the public?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is a lesson that I've learned over and over and over again, well into like a professional software development career as well, is that like, you have to have a quality bar. You have to know what's like good enough, and it shouldn't explode in your face. Or if it's going to, you need to make sure that your audience knows that that's the state that it's in. But it is just so critically important to like get a thing that works out into the world. If you sit there and polish, and I know maybe David Rutten would disagree with me on this, but if you sit there and polish, then you will polish the wrong things. You just will. Like the things that you spend your energy on, the things that you think you need to get perfect, the things that you think you need to architect and future-proof, you'll just be wrong about those things. You will not know until you put it out in the world and get user feedback, get user testing, get folks to like interact with and play with and test. And it just like, I have never once correctly predicted what the thing was going to be.
For me, it's really when you kind of have an end-to-end success and something stable. It doesn't have to have all the bells and whistles and every possible option, but PDF Plus, for example, as soon as I could just draw curves and then get a PDF out at the end, I pushed it out. And then it was just to see what people wanted. And I kept adding features, things I was interested in. But, one thing I've learned is like, I've had to have less and less ideas about what I want to do with it and more like get a basic, simple thing out there in the world and let it grow. I think there's a lesson from Grasshopper in that it was just stable in the beginning, and it kind of worked, and because it's built on Rhino Common, which was relatively complete compared to other options at the time. And so that was kind of the goal I have now, is like make sure it works so people can use it reliably, and then they'll start messaging you in different tones, but letting you know what they want it to do. And then that's kind of where you can go from there.
Yeah, ditto to what everyone has said there. I mean, for us, it's been like, when do you know it's done? When do you know it's ready? For me, it's always been, did the thing I just coded or created, did it deliver value to me? Was I able to prove it to myself that this thing worked in a meaningful way, and therefore it can be proven to others that it'll work? It's very intuitive, I think. And then there's the iteration process. You know, once you get it out to people, people will tell you where maybe it broke for them in a way that you didn't anticipate, and then you have this kind of feedback loop. So you kind of need to be able to sort of say like, hey, this is good enough for me. Can this be good enough for others? And then kind of move on and iterate.
Yeah, like everything that everyone said. Plus, I add, like, when we usually develop a tool, it's coming from someone that needs something. And then at that point, I asked all the questions, and one more question, that if it crashes, can we fix it in a day? So if you have that infrastructure in place, then I feel very comfortable, just let it crash. Because that's actually good, because one, the person understands you really care and they get this thing and they will be more involved. So yeah, it should meet the minimum bar quality, of course. But the thing is always is, if you send it and they don't get back to you with some problem or feature request, either they don't use it, right? Or something is wrong. Because like they should, that's part of the process. So that thing of like making sure you can maintain this quickly and keep the conversation going, I think is very important.
And can I add one thing too? We often find that the very end of that conversation happens when everybody stops talking. You know that the polishing is done when nobody has any comments.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is you don't have to wait till AECtech to let me know what's broken. Like you can email before. Like I just love the fix list I get every year. So
I would say the number one thing that we get feedback on regarding Lunchbox specifically, and a variety of other tools, is it didn't install correctly. And I think that's so critical. We don't, we think about like, oh, we're going to iterate on like making the perfect panelization algorithm, and we're going to like refine the planning tool, and we're going to do all this stuff. But, or the, all the,
right click and unblock.
yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. That's the number one support request is like, this isn't installing. And it's even more so exaggerated now because thanks to all the moves that we're seeing between Net Framework and Net Core. That's been basically the bane of my existence for the last year, is like helping people navigate that. I'm like, oh, people want the Net Core version of Lunchbox. Get that out there. And then we get an equal number of emails of like, hey, can you make the Net Framework version of Lunchbox? Now, I'm like, well, you go back a few versions, and yeah, it's crazy. Deployment is so crucial to understand, I think, for this user experience side.
Okay, we got some more questions. I don't know. There's one right here. Okay, good.
So over the course of your journeys, there's obviously like, good moments and some, not so good moments and all. What were some of these sort of moments that were fulfilling and rewarding? I saw some quotes in some of the slides and so on. What were some of those like really rewarding moments that you didn't anticipate? And what were some of those, oh shoot, moments?
So the oh shoot moments was after I threw up and all that. But I think 1 month in, Dropbox blocked my account. I was like, what the hell? Why did you do that? And I emailed them. And turns out, because I was hosting Ladybug Tools on Dropbox, Ladybug at the time for Dropbox, so many people were downloading it. They blocked my account. They were thinking that I didn't put it on for Rhino at the time, because they had to confirm it. I didn't want anyone to confirm what I do. That was that moment. But a very rewarding moment, and it's happening still, like, is when people come to me and say, like, we built a business because of Ladybug Tools, or, I got a job because of Ladybug Tools. I think I got emotional. Yeah, that's very good. I just thinking about, you put something out there that basically had, made someone's life better. And that's huge. I never thought, like bunch of user objects, even like it was not a real Grasshopper. I don't know if I qualify as a plugin developer, but yeah, that can have that effect. I think that's for me.
I think the most rewarding moments for me are just seeing what other people make with like Lunchbox and the other tools that we create. I have very little insight in what people do with this plugin, even though it's like very widespread and used by a great many computations. I very rarely see anything that's been like produced. And every now and then I'll get an email that kind of shows like, hey, I made this with Lunchbox, or this Excel component really saved my life this one day, or the machine learning stuff that you recently introduced helped me solve this really critical problem. And those are few and far between when we actually get that kind of insight. When it does, it's like the world. In terms of oh shit moments, I don't know. It's like, I can speak maybe to it because we now have kind of more paid for plugins and stuff like that. When the website goes down, it's like, you get the email of, hey, I can't reach the licensing server, or I can't get to the website to download the thing, and that's like, oh crap, I
Friday,
need to
6 p.m.
exact. It always happens.
Friday,
Always
6
happens. Always happens.
I think mine is sort of a combination of both a rewarding and a no shit moment, because I think Human UI was only ever intended to really be sort of like control panels sitting on top of Rhino. And then I would go on LinkedIn and I would see all these firms that were like, we developed an app, and it would clearly be like a screenshot of a Human UI window with like a little 3D mesh model and stuff in it. And I'm like, that's not how you're supposed to use that. That's not what that's for. But it was also incredibly rewarding to be like, oh, people really like this idea of being able to like take their Grasshopper tools and package them up and make them available. And Human UI is particularly screenshotable. So I think people had a degree of pride when they would put an interface together and put it out there in the world and be like, look, we're serious developers now. We're not just making spaghetti. We're like making interfaces. And so like, I was a little surprised by that. I didn't anticipate it, but it's also, I'm always like, look at that. I see it. That's cool.
Can I add
Yeah.
one thing, like to build on that? So I mentioned seeing cool stuff that people are making as like a rewarding thing. I've seen also the opposite side of that, like really bad design and clearly Lunchbox was being used. And you really internalize that and you're like, oh, did I have a hand in putting something awful out in the world? Like, oh.
I
have that
all.
You ever seen Voronoi in the world?
I don't have anything to add to the upsides. It's definitely the same thing. I'm just seeing what people make with it. The downside was a little different when I realized I'd never been hired for a job for my design abilities, but for the tools I made. So that kind of hurt a little. But yeah, that was, when you don't charge any money, there's not really a downside. So.
Nice. More questions. We've got a couple people up here. Oh, we've got a mic up there.
Yeah, quick question. Relevant to Andrew and David, but I'm curious what you all say, including Brian. What is the evolution of UI within Grasshopper? It seems like a lot of the focus now is towards, online interfaces, so, Shapediver, which is divorced from maybe the Rhino users who aren't Grasshopper competent, but still need to hybridize between Grasshopper and Rhino and access geometry back and forth. So I am concerned because you both mentioned, lacking time for support of these plugins. Do you see that in your future or the future in general, or potentially integrated with Rhino in the future? Just your thoughts.
Just a short answer on that. I was really fearing the core conversion for UI Plus, and then someone emailed and offered to do it the other day. So that's coming. That's good. I don't know. I think about this a lot because a lot of it is I've noticed people like to hide Grasshopper in the background, like do all the power and bring things up front. And you see a lot of like web-based versions of this and some attempts in like a desktop-based version. But I've often wondered about what's a way to approach this within a Rhino UI where you can essentially make dynamic dashboards or something. So it might be the 17th project, but I don't know yet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I really know. The only thing I definitely know the answer to is I will probably be not be the one to bring it to you. I think my Human UI days are mostly behind me. But I do think the advent of the kind of web-based interfaces is interesting, not just because it decouples them from Grasshopper in some way and thereby gives them a bit more reach, but also because I just feel like web technologies are a really great like platform for UI development generally. So I feel like if I were to start tomorrow, I think I would probably like reach for web technologies to be, even if that was still embedded, even if it was still a little browser window like in the app. So if somebody wants to go build that, I think maybe even people are already starting to build things like that, but that feels like the next thing. And also that might afford a level of cross-platform support that I was never able to do because I, relied on WPF, which is Windows only. And so none of it works on a Mac. And yeah, that's all I know.
I guess I'll give one little plug for the work that Ehsan was doing. So the workshop yesterday, it's possible now to take a Grasshopper definition and put it in a plugin and have some other code that calls that Grasshopper definition, and you can put UI in that plugin and write it. I don't have all the details for you, but I think it's actually possible now to take a Grasshopper definition, put a UI in front of it, stick it in a plugin, and distribute it to people in Rhino 8.
That's cool. I see that.
More questions? We got 24 seconds.
Can you all share some anecdotes or advice about working at the forefront of what is, like a legacy, kind of legacy industry or very high risk, difficult industry to kind of develop new tools for?
It may not be the best answer, but the one I usually give is like, just start on your own time. Because if you can start to build out something, you can take the time you need to learn it, then bring something of value forward. Most of the tools I developed, I kind of did it on my own time. And one of the moments of like, oh, I'm going to keep doing this in AEC was the CEO of Woods Bagot was in town, Ross Donaldson at the time, and he just happened to walk by my desk while I was messing with Bumblebee. He had no idea what it was, but he just like, he's a really smart guy, knew the tech side, but he just thought it was really interesting. And he asked me at the time if I wanted to just do this at the firm. And I was like, no, I want to be an architect. It'll be great. And like 10 years later, that haunts me, what could have been. But yeah, it's like just starting to make stuff and put it out there. Like it will grab the eye of people who can see it.
I think for me, the lesson is sort of like your impact as someone on the cutting edge will be proportional to your empathy for the people who are not on the cutting edge. The extent to which you understand the problems of the people around you who are scared to make those leaps, who are not the people who press all the buttons in the software to see what they do. Those people should be on your mind, and if you keep a focus on that, keep a relationship with that, then you can actually be really impactful with the stuff that you take to the next level.
That and I would say there's an aspect of this where look for the community and look to where you can somehow find a way to contribute to it. So Grasshopper became successful and continues to be successful. It's almost so successful, it's really hard to get unstuck from. I was thinking about the question of the UI interfaces and hiding Grasshopper, and then like all the other stuff that's happening where, it's almost like revisiting old Grasshopper logic, but now it's in the cloud, and but still people go back to the Grasshopper definition. It's so important to kind of think about. But I think the community, like today's community, where is the innovation happening and what's resonating with people today? And as we're talking today, and I've been thinking through a number of strategies that we've been working with other firms on, and the topic of AI. There's an interesting anecdote from a firm that we are currently doing business with, where they put out a competition internally on image prompting, and there was a prompt for the prompt, in a way, like come up with an image that represents X, Y, and Z, and there's going to be an internal design review and critique and everything like that. And what they found was that people that contributed some of the best ideas to this competition and generated the best results did not come from anyone involved in computational design or technology. The AI conversation, the AI, like the way that the technology is working for people today, it's activating an area of interest in people's brains that is resonating in a similar but different way than perhaps Grasshopper resonated with us when we were doing it, right? It's all of a sudden getting more people, different people, not just more people, maybe different people to enter into the conversation and contribute to this dialogue and build a community around that. You're starting to see every now and then I'll come across a colleague that has an Instagram now with some of their AI generated work. They would have never thought to make a script or do a thing, but it's like really interesting to see how different tools are resonating, and the community thing is being is a big driver to that, contributing out there, putting it out there.
I think you should fall in love with the problem, not the solution. I think that's the key. Like for you have, if you find a problem that you can really fall in love with the problem and focus on that, then I think hypes comes like different waves of things comes and go. But it's very important to fall in love in a problem that you really resonate with and you're good at solving. I think that to me is the key.
Jeroen, how are we doing on time? One more question? Okay, one more question. I'll bring it up. You got it?
The race. So you all mentioned having learned programming through Grasshopper, and I mean you've all hacked basically Grasshopper in various ways to use it. So I mean it's not really like for any kind of insights, but I'm just curious, what are the wackiest and quirkiest ways that you've used Grasshopper in like the most unexpected non-AEC way?
I passed.
I one time, this is like early on, I was like, I wonder if there's a way to get Grasshopper to do my taxes. And this was like early on. I was like, there's rules, there's like a flow of calculations that need to happen. And so, here I am sitting in my Los Angeles apartment after like probably doing an update to Lunchbox. I was like, I would probably want to see, I wonder if I could do this calculation and get my form done, That's silly shit.
How was the audit?
Yeah.
Well, my script didn't work, so I didn't get very far. It turns out my wife was much better at doing taxes than any Grasshopper script than we could do.
I'm still thinking of an answer.
I don't know if it's a great one, but the name tags are generated in Grasshopper every year because I don't want to type all that out in InDesign. So that's PDF plus at work. So.
Thank you. That reminded me of one that was really stupid. When we were at, no, sorry, that sounded rude. No. Sorry. I'm not a bitch, I swear. It was for, we like did, it was like a team building exercise, and we all took this test to try to understand what our like personality qualities were. And I like aggregated all of that data and made customized name tags off of the base of that. It was, sorry. I didn't mean it.
I remember one that Andrew did.
Wait, whoa.
So Andrew did this thing that he made his face with Grasshopper components. Have you seen that? It's like, dude, it's so cool.
I saw one come across my Instagram. This was maybe about 5 years ago when we put out, I think, the first iteration of Lunchbox ML, some of the machine learning components we had in there. Someone had mocked up a little self-driving car. It had trained this like little Grasshopper car on a racetrack, and it then used the ML components to have this thing like kind of peter around the track. And I was like, you're using Grasshopper? I'm never getting into a self-driving car. No way.
What's the April Fool one that someone made too?
I know what you're talking.
Yeah, someone made something that and I think that's what I liked about the old Grasshopper forum, because you could go every day and see the things that people shared. Discourse doesn't have that. But the thing that you would go there and then it was the thing, and then for everyone, so you would move your mouse and all the components basically go around. You couldn't click on any components. Like just like you had to track. That was very good.
I think I saw a similar one where the graph would just collapse. Like you'd open it and you'd put the component on the screen, and instead of everything would just fall as like a big pile at the bottom. It's like a gravity component.
Wow, that's really fun. I think I'm glad that was the last question. Thank you all for being here for this. Thank you for the wonderful panelists. Please help me thank them.